Hello, I'm Philip Chase. Welcome to my YouTube channel on the best of fantasy. Today I'll be reviewing The Elven by Bernhard Hennen and James Sullivan. The English edition that I read was translated by Edwin Miles. This is the first book of the Saga of the Elven, a 7-book series, 7 as far as I can tell. It's a little difficult to come by information on the series, which was originally in German. But this has been translated along with 2 of the other books of the Saga of the Elven, Elven Winter and Elven Queen. There also appear to be a couple spin-off series as well, written by Bernhard Hennen. And there, I think, is as well a sequel written by Sullivan on one of the main characters. I'm not going to say which, because that would be a bit of a spoiler. Of course, it'd be easy enough for you to find out. But I would recommend waiting until you get to the end of the Elven to find out which character Sullivan has written about. That book, by the way, also is in German, I believe, and has not been translated as far as I know. It's a little difficult to come by information on these books, in English at least. So anyone out there who has actually read the whole saga and the spin-offs or the sequel, please correct me if I'm wrong about any of this information. I did my best to find out with the limited amount that's out there in English. Now, this is unabashedly old school fantasy, although it was published originally in 2004, fairly recent. But it's a quest narrative of a sort with plenty of action and battle sequences, and especially later in the book you get lots of that action. And there are various fantasy races that are more or less familiar to most fantasy readers, although perhaps they do have a bit of a German stamp on them in this particular book. Hennen and Sullivan's take on elves is not so different from Tolkien's. It also reminded me a lot, in a way, of the 80s when I was playing D&D, that sort of thing. Not only the elves, but some of the other fantasy creatures that you'll encounter in the book. But Hennen's elves are perhaps a little less remote than Tolkien's, if no less beautiful. There are 2 main plots that intertwine. There is a love triangle, which is a fairly unusual love triangle in that there seems to be no jealousy involved. The 2 male rivals are actually very close friends, and they bond even more in the course of their adventures, their quest to find their beloved. Now, the other bigger narrative here is a war, the surrounding narrative that through the machinations of a demon, a powerful demon that is an old foe to the elves, has been manipulating things, kind of a puppet master figure, and it involves a human war that this demon has basically triggered. And this is a war through a hostile religion, the Tjurid faith. And this is a war against the elves and all the other Albankin. These are the creatures of the elvish world. These include centaurs and kobolds and gnomes and fairies and trolls and that sort of thing. So this war has the intention, like pretty much all aggressive religions have, of wiping out all that is different. And these 2 plots play out over the course of about 1,000 years. So this is a really big, sprawling book. Honestly, the plot is kind of clunky in places as the 3 main characters travel through time, skipping decades or centuries, and the reader, obviously, as well, as the reader follows along with these 3 main characters, during which the bigger narrative continues without the main characters or the reader. And this leaves some big gaps that are perhaps, I'm guessing that these gaps are filled in by subsequent books in the Elven series, which probably don't continue from the end of the Elven, but fill in these gaps, at least in places. Again, those of you who have read the series, please let me know if that is the case. Also, the first 100 pages or so felt like almost a complete story. I almost thought, okay, what happens now? And each time the 3 main characters travel in time, it's like a new chunk of story kind of gets layered on top of the last one. So in spite of this clunkiness, though, I really found myself drawn back into the story each time. And I think it's because of the 3 main characters. Perhaps my favorite character in the whole book is Mandred Torgridson. He is the human who accompanies the two elves on their quest to find their beloved. And he also plays a very important role in the bigger narrative as the ancestral founder of the kingdom, the human kingdom that helps the elves in their war against the Tjurid faith. And he plays a really wonderful part in the story because Mandred humanizes the story. He is the comic relief in a sense, but he also reminds me a lot of Tormund Giantsbane from A Song of Ice and Fire or Game of Thrones, for those of you who watch the show. He's comical, but he's also a tragic figure. For the elves who live very, very, very long lives and are actually reborn until they go into the moonlight, traveling through time isn't such a big deal. It's certainly jarring, but not the end of their lives. But for Mandred, it really means a terrible isolation. He has lost everyone he knows every time he skips in time. And this tragedy, though, helps him to bond with the two elves that he accompanies, and he forms a really wonderful bond with Nuramon and Farradin while journeying with them to free their beloved Nor-El. One of Mandred's companions is Nuramon the Elf, and he is the gentle healer with a tragic past, and Nuramon really has to find himself to reach his full potential. He introduces a lot of beauty and melancholy into the story, the melancholy that you expect to see with the elves, and it probably reaches its height in this particular character due to the things that happen to him, particularly at the end. I'm not going to say anything about that, but really a beautifully drawn character, I would say. The other elvish rival for the affections of Nor-El is Farradin. And Farradin is the fierce one. He's the fighter. He's the assassin. And he is driven by the losses of the past. Again, I don't want to say too much about that. No spoilers here. But Farradin is defined by determination. And these two make a really interesting pair because, as I said before, there's no jealousy between them. They're actually very close. And they help each other in ways that are really quite vital to the plot of the story. So that is really beautifully done, the relationship between Mandred and Nuramon and Farradin. Really probably my favorite aspect of the book is really the bond between these three. Other characters in the book, including Nor-El, I think could have been sketched out a little bit more in detail. Particularly in Nor-El's case, she's a really interesting character. More could have done with her. She's a sorceress. And there's a bit of her in the beginning, and I really wish there had been more of her in the middle, and especially at the end. If you get to the end, you'll probably see what I mean. It would have been great to see things more from her perspective at the end, but she is a very intriguing character and fairly well done for the amount of time she gets in the narrative. Another example of a character I would have loved to have seen more of is Emerald, the queen of the elves. Really interesting, remote figure. It would have been nice to see a little bit more of her motives at times. I understand that it was a bit of a narrative device to not let us know what's going on in her head, but still it would have been nice. I do think, however, that in some of the sequel books in the series, we're going to get a lot more of Emerald, so I'm really looking forward to that. And the rest of the characters are fairly flat. They do serve their purpose. The Tjurid baddies and the demon figure, the Devanthar as he's called, and the various other gnomes and dwarves and trolls. These are well done. They're well sketched, and they brought me back to my, as I said before, my D&D days back in the 80s. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I would say that the other characters were well drawn enough, and they certainly served their purpose of furthering the plot. So to sum it up, I would definitely recommend The Elven for anyone who is a lover of old school fantasy. And I'm going to continue myself with the 2 books, at least, that have been translated to English so far. And I'm really hoping that more of the books will be translated into English once again. Perhaps some of my German viewers could let me know if they have any idea if that's in the works or not. But yeah, this is a great series, and I do recommend it. I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm looking forward to more. And later this week, I will be recording my fall TBR, just to let you guys know what I'm going to be up to for the next few months. So I hope you'll join me then and see what I'm going to be doing. And I look forward to seeing you again. Until next time.